He conquered the known world, building an empire that stretched all the way from Greece to India. He was a military genius, they said a descendant of the gods, a man who literally never lost a single battle. And then, right at the peak of his power, he was just gone. Today, we're diving into one of history's greatest and coldest unsolved cases. Picture this. The year is 323 BCE. The place is Babylon, baking in the summer heat. And Alexander the Great, just 32 years old, is dead. The man who redrew the map of the entire world, who led his armies across deserts and over mountains, wasn't defeated on the battlefield. No, he was taken down in his own bed. The official story, a sudden raging fever. But rumors of poison started swirling almost immediately. For more than 2,000 years, people have been arguing about what really happened. Was it just a random illness, a carefully plotted assassination, or was it some bizarre medical condition that nobody at the time could have possibly understood? This is a 2,300-year-old cold case, and we are going to examine every piece of evidence. All right, to solve any mystery, you've got to start with what you know for sure. So let's lay out the facts, the undisputed timeline of Alexander's final, agonizing days.
So, according to the official court journals, what they called the royal ephemerides, his decline was pretty gradual. It all starts after a night of heavy drinking. He feels a fever coming on. But for days, he just pushes through it, giving orders, offering sacrifices to the gods. But that fever just keeps climbing, relentlessly, until on day 6, he loses the ability to speak. And within 12 days, he's dead. Now that sounds pretty straightforward, right? Like a bad illness. But other accounts paint a very different picture.
Yeah, check this out. The historian Justin tells a completely different and way more dramatic story. He claims that right in the middle of a banquet, Alexander just cries out in agony, like he'd literally been stabbed with a dagger. He was carried away from the party, half dead, in so much pain that he was begging for his sword to just end his own life. Now that doesn't sound like any fever I've ever heard of. That sounds like poison. And that, my friends, opens up our very first case file. Okay, so if we're talking murder, well, there was no shortage of suspects. When you're the most powerful man in the world, you tend to make some pretty powerful enemies. So, who's on our list of suspects? Well, first up, you've got Antipater, his own regent back in Macedon. He was falling out of favor, and he knew Alexander had this nasty habit of purging people he didn't trust anymore. Then there were his own generals. They were getting seriously tired of his addictive inclination towards conquest and his growing ego. I mean, the guy was dressing up like the god Ammon and demanding that people worship him. And the army? They were just plain exhausted, thousands of miles from home, and had already mutinied once to stop him from marching even deeper into India. Yeah, plenty of motives to go around. This is where we can bring in a little modern science to look at this ancient crime. So what about the murder weapon? Strychnine was around back then, but it kills way too fast, in hours, not the 12 days we're talking about. There's a newer theory about a bacterial toxin, calicheamycin, which has some plausible symptoms. But the prime suspect for a lot of researchers is a plant called Veratrum album, or white hellebore. And you know what? Veratrum album, it just ticks all the boxes. It was a known poison in the ancient world. If you ferment it in wine, it becomes almost completely tasteless. And the symptoms? They are a perfect match for those more dramatic accounts. Sudden, blinding pain, followed by a slow, agonizing decline over many days. You could easily slip it into his wine at that final banquet, and no one would be the wiser. The case for poison looks pretty strong. But hold on, a poisoning conspiracy, as juicy as it is, doesn't convince everyone. Many historians still argue for a much more ordinary culprit, disease. So let's open up our next case file, death by natural causes. For a long time, this was the leading theory, that he just got sick. But when you really dig into the details, these common disease theories start to fall apart. Typhoid fever? It almost never kills in less than 3 weeks. Alexander was gone in about 12 days. Malaria? The classic signs like terrible headaches and violent soaking sweats are never once mentioned in the accounts. What about West Nile virus? Well, the timing's all wrong. He got sick in late May, but the virus season in Babylon didn't usually kick off until August. The evidence just doesn't quite line up. And this is where the investigation takes a really fascinating modern turn. Since the ancient accounts can only take us so far, some researchers are now turning to 21st century medicine to diagnose a 2,300-year-old patient.
You've probably heard of CTE, right? We talk about it all the time with football players and boxers. It's a degenerative brain disease that's caused by getting hit in the head over and over again, and it can fundamentally change a person's personality, leading to things like paranoia and sudden irrational fits of rage.
So why are we even talking about CTE in relation to Alexander the Great? It all comes down to this one number, 2. That's the number of severe, documented head wounds Alexander took in battle. He was a frontline warrior, remember? The first was a blow from a battle axe that smashed his helmet. The second was a huge stone to his head and neck. And that creates a very real potential link between his battle scars and how he started acting later in life. So could this be the key? Could CTE explain why this brilliant, composed leader slowly turned into an irrational, paranoid tyrant who even murdered one of his best friends in a drunken rage? It provides a chilling medical reason for the exact behavior that gave his own generals a motive to kill him. It's a crazy feedback loop. But there's one more theory, and it's even stranger. Okay, get ready for this one because it is a wild ride. It's called Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS. It's a really rare disorder where your own immune system basically turns on you and starts attacking your nerves. The result is a slow, creeping paralysis that usually starts in your feet and moves up your body. And here's the truly terrifying part. The whole time, you are often completely conscious, fully aware, but locked inside a body that can no longer move. Now, this whole theory hangs on one of the absolute strangest details from the entire story. After they pronounced him dead, Alexander's body supposedly lay unembalmed in the sweltering Babylonian heat for 6 full days, without showing any signs of decomposition. How on earth is that possible?
Well, a researcher has an answer, and it is absolutely mind-bending. The reason his body didn't decompose is because he wasn't actually dead. GBS could have paralyzed him so completely, made his breathing so shallow that the royal physicians simply mistook him for dead. So while the ancient Greeks saw a god whose flesh wouldn't corrupt, a modern doctor sees something far more horrifying, a man who was declared dead while he was still alive.
So poison, disease, or being tragically buried alive, whatever the cause, the result was the same. The death of the king unleashed absolute, world-shattering chaos. With what was thought to be his final breath, he was asked who should inherit his vast empire. His answer? It might as well have been a lit match tossed into a barrel of gunpowder. He supposedly whispered, "To the strongest." It wasn't a succession plan, it was an open invitation to war. And believe me, his generals took that challenge to heart. They immediately started carving up the empire for themselves in a flimsy truce. The ultimate prize, Alexander's body itself, the symbol of legitimacy, was literally hijacked by his general Ptolemy and rerouted to Egypt. That truce didn't last long, which kicked off 50 years of non-stop, brutal warfare as his successors tore his empire and each other to absolute shreds. And this all leads to a really tough but powerful assessment of his entire legacy. For all his military genius, as a king, he was an abject failure. He built this incredible empire but made zero stable plan for it to outlive him. His failure to name a real successor directly led to the destruction of everything he'd built and the deaths of countless thousands of people. So what really killed Alexander the Great? Was it a dose of white hellebore slipped into his wine? Was it a simple mosquito bite? Or was it a rare neurological disorder that led to the most tragic misdiagnosis in history? Without a body to examine, this is one cold case that's likely to stay cold forever. But in the end, maybe how he died isn't as important as what happened because he died. His story is this stark, brutal reminder that conquering the world is one thing, but building something that lasts, that's another thing entirely. And in that, the legacy of Alexander the Great is one of chaos, fire, and a brilliant, shattered dream.